This video will show you how to create a dashboard. Press the Create button and select Dashboard. You'll be prompted to select a data source for the dashboard. In this case, we'll use a data worksheet as the data source. The Sales Explorer data worksheet. You have a choice now whether you want to use the wizard to help you design the dashboard or whether you want to proceed directly to Visual Composer, which is the full dashboard design tool. Let's take a very quick look at the wizard. We'll press the Open Wizard button, and this displays the Visualization Recommender. The recommender lets you select fields from your data source and then recommends a particular representation for the data. For example, if we select the field category and the field quantity purchased, the recommender suggests a chart. This is of course not the only way to represent this data. So at the top, the recommender provides other possible representations of this data. For example, we might select a table, in which case these two fields are represented in tabular form. But let's say it's the chart that we wanted. We can return to the chart representation. We can, of course, choose different types of charts, but in this case, let's say that the chart that we have here is basically what we want. We can then press the Finish button to add the chart into the dashboard. We are still in the wizard environment here, and the giant plus sign allows us to add additional components. Click the plus sign to return to the recommender and add another component. In this case, we might want to add a gauge, so we could select the measure that we want to represent, perhaps total, and select a gauge representation. Again, press Finish to add the component into the dashboard. Components here in the wizard can be moved around, and additional components can be added in the same way. When the basic outline of the dashboard is finished, you would press the Continue button, and this then would take you to the Visual Composer tool. Here you can see that the chart and the gauge have already been added into the dashboard, and you could then proceed to add any additional components as well as make modifications to the chart and the gauge. If we had skipped the wizard step, we would have arrived at the Visual Composer without these components added. So if you skip the wizard and simply open the Visual Composer like this, you would then add whatever components you want from the component list in the left panel. This is what we'll do in our example. We can now begin adding components to this dashboard. Let's begin with a chart. Drag a chart component from the panel on the left into the dashboard canvas. Press the Edit button in the center of the chart, or the Edit button at the top right to open the chart editor. For this chart, we'll display total versus category. Expand the data source at the top left, locate the category dimension, and add this dimension onto the x-axis. Then find the total measure and add this measure onto the y-axis. When the chart is complete, press Finish Editing. You can resize the chart as desired by dragging on the borders or the move handles. See the video on creating charts for more detailed information about creating a chart. Let's now add a crosstab below the chart. Drag a crosstab component from the left panel below the chart in the dashboard. Press the Edit button in the center of the crosstab or at the top right to open the crosstab editor. For the row header, we'll add the category dimension. Drag the category field to the rows region. For the column header, we'll add the state dimension. Drag the state field to the columns region in the crosstab editor. For our aggregate, we'll use the product total. From the measures folder, locate the total field and drag that to the aggregates region in the crosstab editor. When you're finished with the crosstab, press Finish Editing. Note that it may be helpful when resizing components or aligning components to turn on the snapping feature. Press the snapping button in the toolbar and select either Snap to Grid or Snap to Objects, or both. In this case, we turned on the Snap to Objects feature so that when we resize the crosstab, we will see an indication when the border of the crosstab aligns with the border of the chart. A crosstab table is a type of table that performs grouping and aggregation. For more information about creating crosstabs, see the video on grouping. To add a regular table to a dashboard, you can drag in the table component and then drag fields into the table. For example, we might create a table that contains the category field, drag this field from the data source in the left panel into the table component. You can then proceed to add additional fields. For example, state, quantity, and discount. This is a basic display of raw data in a table. You can also use an editor similar to what we had for the crosstab. To do this, press the Edit button at the top right of the table. This provides a little bit more control over the arrangement of the fields in the table, their sorting, and visibility. For this dashboard, we will not use this basic kind of table, so let's remove it. Note that when you're repositioning components on a dashboard, you can hold down the Shift key while dragging to constrain the movement to a particular direction, either horizontal or vertical. You can also use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move a dashboard component in large increments or in smaller increments by holding down the Control key while pressing the arrow buttons. Let's now add some filtering to this dashboard. Filters allow you to slice and dice the data to achieve the most meaningful view. Let's add two filters, one to filter the category and one to filter the date range of the data in the dashboard. To filter the category, from the data source in the left panel, drag the category field into an empty region of the dashboard. This creates a selection list that allows you to filter the categories. Note that as you make selections in the selection list, the chart and the crosstab both update to display only the selected categories. For more information about filtering components like selection lists, please see the video on filtering. Let's add another filter component, in this case, to filter the date range displayed in the dashboard. To do this, drag the date field into the dashboard to obtain a date range slider. This range slider will restrict the range of dates displayed in the dashboard, and again, it affects both the chart and the crosstab because it operates directly on the data source. Let's now add a KPI gauge, Key Performance Indicator. This gauge will display the aggregated total for the data corresponding to the selections that the user has made. Drag a gauge from the left panel toolbox into the dashboard. To display the aggregated total on this gauge, locate the total field and drag it onto the gauge. The gauge now displays the aggregated total, in this case the summed total, for the selections that the user has made in the selection list and the range slider. Let's take a look at the properties that are available for a gauge. For all components, you can right-click on the component and select Properties to open the Component Properties dialog box. Most components have a similar set of tabs at the top: a General tab, a Data tab that allows you to change the binding of the data to the component, an Advanced tab that has some special features specific to that component, and a Script tab that allows you to write scripted logic. In this case, let's use the General tab to simply change the appearance of the gauge to one of these other faces. Let's add some text below the crosstab. First of all, you can find the text component and drag it into the dashboard. You'll find it in the output folder in the left panel. Drag the text component into the dashboard, double-click, and enter the desired text. Enter the text, Sales Dashboard. Let's format this text to be large and bold, as would be suitable for a title of the dashboard. Click on the text to select it, and then click to select the Format tab in the left panel. Here you can specify the font, the size, the color, and other properties of the text. The Format panel that you see here is available for all components and for multiple regions of certain components, such as a selection list, where you can independently format, for example, the title and the body. Note that for components like this that have multiple regions that can be formatted, the status bar at the bottom of the dashboard will indicate which region is currently selected for formatting. Right now, the selection list's cell is the target of formatting. Now, it is the title of the selection list that will be formatted with the properties that we select. In this case, though, we only want to format this text element, so again, click on the text element, and then let's make it large and bold. This is more suitable for a title of the dashboard, so let's move it to the top of the dashboard. And if necessary, we can move the other components down. Drag across all of the components in the dashboard to select them, and then either click and drag, or use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move these components down to make space for the title. We can actually make the font of the title even bigger, perhaps 24 point, and then resize the text component to make sure that the entirety of the text is displayed. To change the alignment of the text, again, click on the text component, and then in the Format panel, select the desired alignment, perhaps center aligned. Then we can resize the text element to the full width of the dashboard. We'll worry about the fine layout of the dashboard later on. Let's add some other formatting to this dashboard. For example, for the chart y-axis, let's change the format of the numbers to represent the data in terms of millions. Click to select the axis on the chart, then select the Format tab in the left panel, and then apply the desired numerical format. Open the Format menu, choose Number as the format type, and then choose a desired format. You can create your own formats, or you can use the presets shown here. See the documentation for an explanation of the different symbols. This set of symbols, hash, 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 with a capital M, will represent the data in terms of millions. We can put a currency symbol at the left side. Note how the format was applied to the y-axis. We can also add a background to the title of the dashboard. Click to select the title, and then specify a background color. Again, using the Format tab in the left panel. Let's save what we've done so far. Press the Save button in the toolbar. Enter a name for the dashboard, and press OK. Let's arrange the components on the right here a little bit better to better make use of the dashboard space. You can resize a cell in a selection list by selecting the cell and then dragging the handle on the right side. This allows you to make multiple columns in a selection list. We'll move the range slider up, and then we can increase the size of our gauge. Let's save the dashboard again, and then view the dashboard in the portal as a user would see the dashboard. Here's the dashboard as it appears in the user portal. You can see that our filters are functional. And the dashboard behaves just as we would expect. We can now return to Visual Composer to make some further edits to the dashboard. We can do this by opening Visual Composer the way that we did earlier, by selecting the dashboard option in the Create button, or we can press the Edit button in the toolbar of the dashboard. This will open Visual Composer with the dashboard open for editing. Let's give the dashboard a slightly nicer appearance by adding a background behind the components. We can do this by adding a rectangle. Find the rectangle component in the Shape folder and drag it into the dashboard. Let's assign a color to the rectangle, click on the rectangle to select it, and then either go to the Format tab in the left panel and assign a background color here, or right-click on the rectangle, select Properties, select the Shape tab, and then assign the desired fill color from the Properties dialog box. If you'd like, you can also assign a gradient fill by selecting the Gradient option. This allows you to create a gradient to fill the rectangle. Resize the rectangle as desired to be slightly larger than the group of components. Move the rectangle behind the components by right-clicking on the rectangle and selecting Send to Back. If you need to make space at the top of the dashboard, you can do that by selecting the components on the dashboard. If you accidentally select the rectangle as well, you can Control-click to deselect the rectangle. Then use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move the dashboard components so as to make space for the rectangle to surround them. Let's add a gray border for the chart and the heading of the dashboard. Click on the chart to select it, and then from the Format tab in the left panel, add a border to the chart. Select all the sides of the chart to apply a border, choose the line style, and then select a color such as some shade of gray. Press the Apply button to apply the border. Repeat this process for the dashboard heading. Click to select that text element, and then create a border. Resize the text element to better fit the rectangle. Save the changes that you've made so far. This dashboard is almost complete, but one thing that you might like to do for a dashboard is to make sure that it displays well on different devices, whether they be a desktop computer, a laptop, tablet, or in some cases a phone. One basic modification that you can make is to scale the dashboard to the screen. That way the dashboard will fill the screen on whatever device it's used on. You can make this simple modification by pressing the Options button in the toolbar, selecting the Layout tab, and then choosing the Scale to Screen option. Press OK to close the dialog box. This dashboard will now be scaled to whatever screen it's being used on, and will fill the entire space in the user portal. Let's save that change, and then take a look at this dashboard in the user portal. Note that the dashboard has increased in size to fill all of the available space in the portal window. Let's return to Visual Composer and take a look at one more aspect of dashboard layout. Reopen the Options dialog box, and note that there are some other options available for scaling to screen. Please see the documentation for information about those options. You can also specify a device layout. A device layout is an instruction that allows the dashboard to be presented in different ways on different devices. This goes beyond simply scaling the dashboard to the screen size and includes selecting which elements of the dashboard to display on particular devices. Let's take a look at an example of creating a device layout. Press the New button, and then either select one of the predefined device layouts or create a new device class by specifying the size range of the device. In this case, we're going to use one of the predefined layouts, such as medium devices. To see what range of sizes medium devices represents, press the Edit button, and note that medium devices are devices that have CSS widths between 992 pixels and 1199 pixels. Provide a name for this particular class. We can simply call it medium or medium device, and then press OK. We have now defined a device layout. Let's define one more device layout by again pressing the New button. In this case, we'll select the extra small devices predefined layout and provide a name such as small devices. Press OK to define the second layout. Then press OK to close the Viewsheet Options dialog box. Note now that in the status bar at the bottom, there is a layout menu. The layout menu allows you to select either master or one of the device layouts that we specified, for example, medium device. If we select one of these layouts, then what we see is a blank dashboard canvas. We can then add components from our dashboard into this canvas to tailor the layout to this particular device class. Note, however, that the names of the components listed here are generic: Selection List 1, Rectangle 1, Range Slider 1. This makes it difficult to know what components we're adding into our dashboard view. To correct this, we should return to the master view and assign meaningful names to all of our components. Let's do this for the chart and the selection list. Return to the master view. Provide a meaningful name for the chart by selecting the Properties option for the chart. We'll call it Sales Chart. And a meaningful name for the selection list. We'll call that Category Selector. Now return again to the medium device layout, and you can see that we now have more meaningful names here: Category Selector and Sales Chart. We can add these components into this particular device layout. To help you lay out the dashboard, in some cases it's helpful to turn on the guides. You can select guides that represent different aspect ratios corresponding to different devices that you might be viewing the dashboard on. These are merely for informational purposes, and ultimately the dashboard layout will be scaled to the device on which it's being viewed. By creating this dashboard layout for medium devices, we can ensure that when a device matching this device class, that is a device that has a width that falls in this device class range, is used to view the dashboard will be displayed as we have laid it out here, with only the chart and the selection list. It will be a fully functional dashboard, but will omit all of those other components that we had in the master view. If the dashboard is viewed on a device that does not match one of the defined dashboard layout classes, then the master view will be used and the entirety of the dashboard will be displayed just as it's been designed in the master view.